We have to stop blaming groups for the crimes of individuals. The human beings love shortcuts. Our brains are wired to categorize and group things together. It's efficient, but it's also dangerous when applied to people. When one person from a group does something terrible, there's a natural tendency for some to blame the entire group. This kind of thinking fuels prejudice, stereotypes, and even violence. When we lump people together, we commit what's called the fallacy of composition, assuming what's true of one individual must be true of the whole group. Now, this is absolutely the case when individuals in extreme groups actively call for the destruction of another group of people. For example, the infidels or the Jews or the straight white men or the LGBTQ plus or Christians or Western civilization. Insert group here. That does happen, and I'm not trying to gloss over it. But people are individuals. So we can't blame every Muslim for 9/11. We can't blame every Christian for the Crusades. We can't blame every Jewish person for what's happening in Gaza, and we can't blame every Palestinian for what Hamas does. A crime committed by one person says something about that person, not the millions of others who may share their race or gender or sexuality or religion. For example, if a trans person commits a mass shooting, that tragic act does not mean all trans people are violent. And by that same logic, when a straight white man commits a mass shooting, as has often been the case in the United States, it would be absurd to say all straight white men are inherently dangerous. Both statements are equally untrue and equally harmful. For example, the Colorado Springs nightclub shooting in 2022, Anderson Lee Aldridge, who identified as non-binary, murdered 5 people at Club Q, a popular LGBTQ plus bar. Their actions were condemned by trans and non-binary activists because violence of one individual does not reflect the values of the trans community at large, which overwhelmingly advocates for equality and acceptance and peace. Yes, there are individuals in those groups who advocate for hate, just like every other group. Look at the Charleston church shooting in 2015. Dylan Roof, a white supremacist, killed 9 black churchgoers in South Carolina. He was a straight white man. Yet his hateful ideology and violent actions do not represent all straight white men, millions of whom condemned the attack and stood in solidarity with the victims. Let's look at the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013. Tamerlan and Johar Tsarnaev, who were Muslim, carried out a horrific bombing. This act led to a wave of Islamophobia, but blaming 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide for the actions of 2 individuals is irrational and unjust. Countless Muslim leaders and communities denounced the bombing immediately. There are extreme Muslims and there are moderate Muslims. The Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, Timothy McVeigh, another straight white man, killed 168 people with a truck bomb. His extremism came from anti-government ideology and belief in violence as a way to influence politics, not from his skin color or religion. Still, his demographic background is often ignored because we instinctively understand it'd be unfair to blame all white men. And then most recently, the Minneapolis church shooting last week. Trans woman Robin Westman opened fire in a church, killing 2 children and injuring 17 others. Westman had written hundreds of pages expressing hate towards almost every group imaginable. To take that individual's actions and use them as a weapon against all trans people would be an egregious act of scapegoating. It ignores the simple truth. Westman did not commit violence because of being trans. She committed violence because of deep personal pathology, rage, and untreated mental illness or treated mental illness. And the pharmaceuticals contributed to homicidal ideation, which is a side effect of a lot of these dangerous psychotropic drugs being administered to mentally unstable people. So blaming an entire community for the actions of one is no different than blaming all white men for the Oklahoma City bombing, all Muslims for the Boston Marathon bombing, or all trans people for the Minneapolis church shooting. It is intellectually dishonest, morally lazy, and socially destructive. When society generalizes the actions of one to the many, it creates a vicious cycle, creates stigmatization. Innocent people are unfairly treated with suspicion, alienation. Marginalized groups feel pushed further away from society, and it creates radicalization. Isolation and prejudice can drive more people towards extremism, thus exacerbating hatred and possibly inciting more mass killings. Blaming groups for the crimes of individuals is not only morally wrong, it actually increases division and violence, the very thing we're looking to reduce. Let's take a look at the root causes. If we truly want to prevent violence, we must look beyond identity labels and examine the real drivers of mass killings. These often include mental illness and untreated trauma. Many perpetrators struggle with severe psychological issues, trauma, PTSD, that go unnoticed or untreated until it's too late, or it is being treated with psychotropic medication. A growing body of evidence links certain psychiatric drugs, particularly SSRIs and other mood-altering prescriptions, to violent outbursts, suicidal thoughts, and even homicidal ideations in a small but significant percentage of users. While these medications help many, they can have devastating side effects for some, as RFK Jr. just pointed out recently. And then social alienation and bullying. Individuals who feel isolated, bullied, or disconnected from society often seek violent ways to reclaim a sense of control or power, or as a way to get attention because they have unsuccessfully been able to get the attention they desire in healthy, positive, or productive ways. And then ideological radicalization. Whether through extremist politics, religion, or online communities, some perpetrators are driven by toxic belief systems. They are literally subconsciously programmed by their communities to hate other people. Understanding these factors is far more productive than scapegoating entire groups of people. Now, it's not easy to talk about all these real reasons, so a lot of people who would rather just blame entire groups and call it good. But I'm not going to do that, and hopefully you won't either. We need to focus on loving our neighbors and on solutions. We need to teach principles that prevent violence, murder, rape, assault, and theft. And we need to do it in a way where those who disagree with us will at least be open to hearing about them. There's a great quote from Dale Carnegie. "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still." And what that means is that you can't force people to change their beliefs or behavior by shaming them, threatening them, or using raw pressure. Even if they nod along, deep down, they still believe what they believed before, and often they'll take it even harder. One often overlooked solution lies in teaching consent, and not just in the context of sexual education, but as a universal principle. When children and adults are taught that every human interaction requires mutual agreement and respect for boundaries, it reinforces the idea that coercion and violence are never acceptable tools. A culture rooted in consent helps people develop empathy, conflict resolution skills, and a deeper respect for the autonomy of others. Skills that can reduce the kinds of frustrations and entitlement that sometimes boil over into violence. But this isn't something that most people in government want to happen, because the government routinely violates the consent of the individuals. Authoritarians do not want people to understand this concept because it undermines their ability to control others and reduces their power. So, hand in hand with consent is the concept of self-ownership and mutual respect. If individuals are raised to understand that they alone are responsible for their choices, their actions, and their lives, they're less likely to externalize blame or seek to control others through force. Coupled with mutual respect, the recognition that every other person has the same right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, this mindset creates a foundation for peace. By teaching self-ownership and respect, we foster resilience, accountability, and community. antidotes to the isolation and rage that often precede mass killings. Equally important is the cultivation of emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, regulate, and respond to our own emotions in a healthy way. A person who is emotionally grounded does not need constant approval or validation from others to feel whole. This inner strength allows individuals to face disagreement without collapsing into rage or hatred, even when confronted with hostility. Emotional intelligence teaches us to respond with empathy rather than retaliation. A society that fosters emotional resilience is one where differences do not escalate into violence, but instead become opportunities for understanding and dialogue. And at the heart of the issue is this truth: every mass killer is mentally unstable. No emotionally balanced, well-adjusted person who has been taught consent, self-ownership, mutual respect, and emotional intelligence would ever walk into a school, a church, or public place and open fire on strangers. The common thread is not race, gender, or identity. It's the absence of these life-anchoring concepts. Most mass killers were never given the tools to manage their emotions, respect other boundaries, or take responsibility for their own choices. When people aren't taught these principles, instability festers and violence becomes their tragic outlet. So, how do we move forward? Instead of pointing fingers at groups, we must return to the core truths. People are individuals, not representatives. A mass murderer's identity category is not what made them violent. Complex personal and psychological and social factors did. If we want to prevent violence, we must study these root causes, not scapegoat whole communities. The next time someone tries to generalize all men are dangerous, or all Muslims are terrorists, or all trans people are unstable, remember, history shows it is individuals, not groups, who commit crimes. Collective blame only fuels more hatred. The real path forward isn't scapegoating. It's building a culture where individuals are equipped with the tools to thrive without violence. If we want people to adopt principles like consent and self-ownership and respect and emotional intelligence, we can't cram it down their throats. We have to teach it, model it, and invite them into it willingly. Real change comes from someone deciding for themselves that a better way exists, not being bullied or coerced into agreement. These are not luxuries. They are necessities for a peaceful society. And until we make these principles as common as reading and writing, we will continue to see instability manifest as tragedy. But once we do, the cycle of violence can finally be broken and the grip of authoritarianism will be loosened.